since then, I've been in South Africa running a small manufacturing business, doing product design and manufacturing. And that has been really the path of the course. So experience in terms of various techniques, processes, from electrical to molding to metalworking to you name it.
I can see this is heading in a direction, but before we get to where we are right now, tell us about the, so where did the hi-fi come in?
I have a deep love for music, very, very deep. And this started when I was over in the UK. I was exposed to some nice hi-fi then, and I realized that I really, really wanted to get into this. And of course, I cut my teeth on the usual NAD AR type system that I think many people did way back then. And at the point when I wanted to progress, I looked around the market, and fortunately, I discovered a couple of gentlemen in the local industry, namely at that point Gunther Steinhardt and Roy Whittleson.
So when was that, Lance?
That was in 96, 97, well, just a bit before that, actually, early 90s, yes. And then I was so pleased because I was able to afford hi-fi that at that time seemed so much better than, and a better value for money. So that was my launch into some real hi-fi.
And that was your interest in the genre as such, but how did that translate into, well, now I think I'd like to become a purveyor?
Well, during that period, I had the privilege of chatting to some of the local manufacturers and getting to know them a little bit, and found they were very, very open and friendly guys. And I also met Skull Carvencha of Valve Audio, and they got to know me, and the local fellow who was representing them in Cape Town was moving off into an IT business, and they asked me if I was interested in taking over and representing them in Cape Town. So, well, my heart just about jumped out, and I said yes, I'll do it. I didn't know enough to do it at that time, but that was the beginning. So I jumped in, and I've been doing that ever since.
Yeah, there's that dog again.
Yes, I have a dog.
Yeah. And you've been combining that with your other business interest as well at the same time?
Yes, I've both two small businesses. The hi-fi's passion has always sort of been a passion on the side, and the small manufacturing business has been my core business. So yeah, the two have fitted in quite well. I never opened a shop as such. I just combined them. Can't say much more about that.
Now let's get in touch with some of those local manufacturers that you are so keen on. Tell us a bit about what particular items you're finding particularly interesting at the moment. And then also over the years that you've been involved with them, how has that relationship developed with them?
It's been a wonderful relationship. I've learned an awful lot when you're talking to the people who actually design and develop the equipment. They know exactly what they're talking about, as opposed to talking to salespeople who don't have the insight into how the things work and so on. So they taught me a lot, and I found that was extremely rewarding. And that relationship has developed. And of course, as I say, they're gentlemen, the nicest people you'll meet. And I've enjoyed that association right the way through. Men of integrity.
But they're a bit shy and retiring, unlike you.
Okay, I'll take that. Yeah.
Tell us about what, and so this is the sponsors, part of the show, I suppose. Tell us a bit about what you've got that's interesting. What's been passing through your hands lately from some of these local guys that you find particularly interesting, and why?
Yes, thanks. Well, I'll just go through some of the names of the products. That'll be the thing. I'm representing the company called Reference Acoustics, who have a turntable that is at the sort of less expensive end of the turntable market. Very nice unit. I'm also representing Sound Structures, who make stands and so on, all types from your basic stands to luxury stands. And there's Sonar Audio, who make a loudspeaker range. And then there's Valve Audio, who have an amplifier range, who's known to most of you, I'm sure. Then there are, I must say, I can't say who they are yet, but there are a couple more amplifier manufacturers due to come on board soon. So we're looking forward to some interest there, but they haven't got a product to show us yet.
There's a question that often comes up in this kind of discussion, Lance, and that is there really a future in South Africa for this kind of manufacturing industry? We're competing against the might of what the rest of the world has to offer. Let's not even if you put China out of the equation, there's still some formidable competition out there. Yeah, what's your view on that?
Yes, it's extremely difficult for our local guys, and I imagine it's small for any small manufacturers around the world. They're the big guys who've got massive advertising campaigns and so on, and the business is extremely brand conscious, and so they have to tackle that sort of thing. And in South Africa, we've got perhaps an extra little bit of a stigma, and that is a perception that the made in South Africa, because it's cheaper, is not as good, perhaps. And so they have to tackle those kind of difficulties. As for the future in our country, well, we don't know. We all sort of struggle on relentless, and we're passionate about what we do. Make no mistake, if any financier or accountant had looked at any of our books, he would have told us all to close a long time ago. But we keep doing it because we love it, and I could the same for all of these guys that are part of my particular circle at the moment.
Now, the thing that's been driving you particularly in the recent past has been and I'll use your words, your newly developed very special turntable. And look, it is very special, no question. It's a very special looks, very special engineering, very special price. Tell us about what led to this, and tell us about your motivation for undertaking this.
Firstly, my love of music, and I grew up with turntables, so I have a fascination for turntables. We are completely helpless, us turntable guys. When we see it, it's a wonderful thing to experience, and we just can't help that. So I'm making my first apology to those guys who are not turntable followers. But yeah, I wanted to own one of these fancy new high-tech machines. During the digital age, the turntable manufacturers have continued their progress. So all aspects of analog playback have improved dramatically. And so it's just got better and better. And I thought I would never be able to afford one of these fancy turntables. So I thought perhaps I should make one. And with my design and manufacturing background, I thought that would be a possibility. And I asked a few of my friends in the business and who knew me and so on. They said, go for it, do it. And that's when the idea started.
These friends of yours who said, go for it, do it. Did they, in their hands, did they hold out large bundles of banknotes or
No,
did they just say you're on your own, friend?
yeah, on my own. I had moral support. That was it. Yeah. Look,
I guess it was,
fortunately,
yeah, yeah.
no, I was just going to say, fortunately, having a workshop and access to some equipment and a few machines and so on, and having an ability to work with my hands, I'm a very nuts and bolts guy. I was able to do most of the work myself on the development of the turntable.
Before we actually get into the, if you'll pardon that, the is this a pun? I don't know. Pardon the expression, the nuts and bolts of your turntable.
Yes.
Um, how long does such a process take? Conception to realization.
Anthony, in my case, it was a 4-year period from the idea to a working prototype, and that 4-year period was every single evening, every single weekend, every single holiday for those 4 years without fail, and including many bits of other days during my normal daily routine. So it was an intense project, but due to my motivation and fascination with it, I kept through it all the way. It was a lot of work, but it was extremely enjoyable.
And did you have a particular goal in mind with this? If I may just then enlarge on that, were you aiming at a niche, a segment, or a style? Maybe you can explain that.
Yes, when you're designing, you have a concept, you have an idea, you have a goal, but it's not actually something you're actually visualizing in your mind. It's just your imagination. And I wanted to achieve something that maximized in terms of its function, in terms of its looks, that it was a complete turntable that would have no corners cut, etc., etc. So I aimed for the highest that I could possibly achieve, and I did not limit myself in terms of price or economics and so on. The idea was simply to just build what I think is the best I could possibly do.
When you say the best, and so you had certain performance parameters anyway, I'm guessing for this then.
Yes, if you looked at high-end turntables that are out there and listen to the kind of sound. We lost our picture for a moment, but I'll keep talking.
Yep, we got you.
Somebody's just joining there. Yeah, it was to achieve the highest possible sonic performance that we could. I wanted a turntable that could accept the top quality tone arms and cartridges, which undoubtedly reveal the most.
And if then I may just jump to the finished product and ask you, have you accomplished what you set out to do before you tell us what it's all about?
I'm very satisfied with what I've done, and I am pleased with it, and I'm my own biggest critic. You have to be when you're designing, and I know what's gone into it, so I'm happy. Regardless of that, no matter what you do, you can always improve, but at this particular point in time, I don't have much that I'm really fiddling with on the turntable.
All right, so why don't you give us a rundown on some of those interesting key features? Just let it rip.
Okay. All right. What I initially did was do a lot of research, and I started to establish the various elements in the turntable that I felt would be the most logical to use to achieve my goals. So I looked at all the turntables and white papers wherever they were available on the fancy turntables around the world to see what they were doing, and made my decisions about which elements I would incorporate. And so started to combine that. And So if we look at things, we could start from the top of the turntable. Perhaps we've got a platter assembly, which is a multi-layered, heavyweight platter assembly, 17.5 kilos. I chose the heavy platter because it has sufficient inertia to overcome the various things that can cause what they call wow, where the speed turns down due to drag of the stylus or vibrations of the belt or anomalies like that. So I realized that key to this design had to be the heavy platter. And of course, that led to a number of other things, because once you've got a very heavy platter, you've got to have a heavy duty bearing. You've got to have a sufficient support structure for that. So one thing leads to another, and we sort of combine those things. During the design process, there's many, you travel down many avenues, but you have to retract when you hit a dead end, because I was not prepared to accept any compromises, in my opinion, of course.
Now, Lance, that platter, it's quite special. I understand, if I recall correctly, that it's sort of a sandwich arrangement.
Yes. In order to overcome any possible vibration from below, I've used this multi-stage platter. The bottom layer is steel, the middle layer is aluminium, and the top layer is acetyl, or POM as it's known. Between them, there are acoustic decoupling layers, and it's structured in such a way that the top platter does not at any point touch any other part of the platter. And so that step goes down and down and down. It's not a direct, when I say touch, no direct hard coupling. So the net result of that is any vibrations that may have occurred from the bottom up are absorbed before they get to the surface of the platter. One of the most crucial parts of a turntable is to have a platter surface which has no vibration on it. Any vibration there will alter the sound.
Of course, in a turntable, any turntable, I think, there's certain considerations that you just can't get away from. Things got to turn at a set speed. It's got to be impervious to the vibrations you're talking about, either by dissipating them, banishing them, squashing them. And you have used, if I understand you correctly, a kind of a mass principle to eliminate vibrations.
Yes. The entire inside of the turntable is filled with what I call mass damping. It's a combination of lead and garnet. So it's incredibly heavy.
Lance, a second now, the garnet, that's interesting. What is particularly
garnet is crushed rock.
What's useful about that particularly?
As opposed to silica, which is your normal sand that builders use when they're mixing cement. I found that silica clogs up after a period of time as it absorbs moisture, whereas the garnet does not. It remains loose. The particles remain separate, which is quite important for absorbing that energy. Now, the inside of the turntable, I say, is filled with this mixture, and all the critical functional components of the turntable, which is the bearing assembly, the feet assemblies, the arm posts, and so on, they are all dampened by this mix of stuff. So the turntable as a whole is inert.
Arm posts, you've mentioned that, so I take it there's more than one option then.
Sorry, Anthony, yeah?
You specifically mentioned arm posts there, so I'm assuming there that there's more than one option for an arm.
Yes, indeed. There are two arm boards on the turntable. So in this level of turntable, quite often you will see there's more than one arm fitted to the turntable. And the reason for that is that you've got the choice of perhaps adding a different cartridge combination and arm combination, which will give you a different flavor. You may prefer a certain combination for your fast jazz type music. You may prefer another combination for bringing out the emotion of music and so on. So it gives the owner the option. They can put an extra arm on the table.
Okay, and then moving perhaps back down the chain to a design decision that probably determines a lot of what happens subsequently, that bearing that you mentioned. Can you tell us a bit about what kind of technology or engineering or design thinking went into the bearing part of things?
Yes, the bearing, as I said, is a pretty heavy duty thing. Had to be to support the heavy platter. I use a fairly traditional type of bearing. It uses oil as lubrication, and the critical aspect of the bearing, as is faced by all turntable manufacturers, is the gap and the tolerance between the shaft and the bearing. So we had to play with that in relation to the viscosity of the oil. So there's a direct relationship between the oil viscosity and the gap and tolerance in the bearing. I went with the oil route because I felt it was the best from a vibrational point of view. And given that the turntable has a very powerful drive system, so that overcomes any resistance that you can get or any friction from the oil itself. So we're talking fine stuff here. But anyway, that was my choice for that. The other interesting part about the bearing is that we had to use a magnetic levitation in order to reduce the weight on the thrust bearing. So we set the turntable magnetic upward force to about 16 kilograms, so that the downward force on the thrust bearing is a mere 1.5. This reduces reduces vibration, and it increases the life of the bearings.
Steve, how do you accomplish that magnetic levitation story?
Well, there are two ring magnets that have like poles opposite each other, so they're pushing. So I did a lot of research into the magnetic thing. That was another part of that whole research, and then eventually got some ring magnets made for me specifically to do the job that would be the right size. So you've got a ring magnet's approximately 100 millimeters in diameter with quite a powerful force.
And I'm trying to think what areas we haven't covered. Now, you've mentioned more than once how heavy this thing is. Just giving us an idea how heavy is this platter actually, and the whole assembly, what is that weigh?
The whole turntable is just over 80 kilograms. So that's the total all-up weight. The other aspect is the motor and the drive system. It is a belt drive turntable, and what I've done there is I've had a stepped drive, which gives us a greater reduction, so that the difference in speed between the motor shaft and the platter is much greater than normal turntables. So I've got about a 50-to-1 ratio, which means that the motor itself sees very little load. Given that, I still have a motor which is about 10 times more powerful than 90% of the turntables out there in the world. So at each step during this design process, I actually went more than what is actually required for purposes of absolute quality and longevity, etc.
Now you got the mechanical, the physical side of things waxed, but there's the electronic side of things, and your motor controller. Could you give us a bit of insight into how that works?
Yes, I had to do an awful lot of learning. I'd not realized the advances in motor technology until I delved into this, and the variety of choice was quite phenomenal. And I went around the world looking at all the usual turntable motors and thinking none of these are actually up to the standard of what I want in terms of accuracy and also the power. So I eventually came across a company called Maxon in Switzerland, who had a range of very, very specialized motors. They do motors for very sophisticated applications, satellites and Mars rovers and Formula One cars, etc., etc. So they're highly specialized. And they make a
I'm
huge
going to
range.
interrupt there again, Lance, and
Yeah.
say, I was getting to the point where I wanted to ask you, have you got any NASA technology in there or something? Because if you've got a component like this, everybody is going to have some sort of space connection with it to be really serious. Well, thank you. You do have that connection.
Okay, yeah. No rocket scientist, I assure you. Nuts and bolts, yes. But the nice thing about the Maxon motor, which I think may be of interest to some of the guys, is that it comes with its own controller. It's not a motor that you can just plug in, wire up and play. It won't work. It has its own encoder on board, and essentially there's data traveling between the motor and the controller while it's running, and it's reading its signal 1,024 times per revolution. And it's making minute voltage adjustments. It's a DC motor, by the way. It's making minute voltage adjustments and maintaining its speed absolutely accurately all the time. Now, that speed I set when I build a turntable, I hook it up to my computer via USB, and I'm able to program the speed of the motor and set it exactly right for that particular turntable. So say, for example, somebody chooses a platter which has got a thicker type of coating on the outside. That will then adjust the diameter, which changes the ratio, which means my motor has to travel at a different speed. So I'm able to take it to that fine level in terms of the presetting of the turntable.
Okay, and then there's a rather mundane part of this whole setup but vital, because without it, the turntable wouldn't work. Tell us about that belt.
Sorry, about that?
Tell us about the belt. The belt, is it a bespoke item? Is it an off the shelf? Is it, would it be one-off where to go into production?
The interesting thing is I made the belts myself, and it wasn't very difficult. It's a silicon cord, and I thought I'd never get away with that. I really doubted that I'd be able to do it right. And for this particular turntable in this application, it's fine. For lightweight turntables, when I say lightweight, I mean with a platter of, say, 2 kilograms or what have you, that's very commonly found. The belt is such a critical item in terms of its elasticity and if it's getting old and a little bit dry, and the tension that you set on it, everything's got to be just right, because the vibrations from that belt and the flex of the belt as it's turning, it's sort of stretching and releasing and stretching, releasing. That kind of oscillation can occur. All of these things can affect how accurately the platter is actually turning. In the case of my turntable, with a very heavy platter with the great inertia, that became less of a problem, interestingly enough.
And now moving somewhat from the nuts and bolts of the turntable to you had an idea, you thought it through, you executed it, you have a product, but it's all very well having a product. You now have to get it out there. So what have you been doing in the line of marketing this turntable?
Well, there's my budget for this is almost zero. What I've done initially is first exposure to the Cape Town Hi-Fi Club 2 years ago in my lounge.
That long ago?
It's 2 years now, yes. Then I went to Joburg a month or two after that and presented it to some folks there at a venue, a place called Audio Exchange. And they very kindly set it up in a high-end system and invited lots of people around. So the Joburg guys got to see it. And after that, I took it to Dion, our friend, dear departed Dion Skuman at AVSA magazine, and he did a review on it, and he published that. That's still available for people to read. He loved it. He went overboard, and I actually had to ask him one day. I said, Dion, really, did you really mean all those things he said? He said, I don't pretend, I don't make up stuff. That's what I heard. Mm-hmm. So I was very happy and thrilled to have him do that for me. Since then, not a lot has happened, except I have been continually testing the prototype, which was built, and checking things like the bearing and so on. So opening it up and examining and so on. And I'm very pleased to say that it's built so heavily, and so the engineering is so strong that there's virtually nothing going wrong with the thing. It just absolutely plays. It's rock solid. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which leads me on to the thing I've just started on the Facebook page. I have to get to sell this thing overseas if I'm to have any success with it, and I'm quite determined to pursue that in any way I can.
You reckon there's an appetite out there for what is a not everyday item?
Yes, I believe so. When you look at what's going on in the world and what's available in the high-end arena, it's so huge, you can't believe it. I thought I had done a lot of research and looked at so many turntables, and every day I look and I see something else. So I think the market is there, and this is not ever intended to be a mass-produced item. It's intended to be a signature turntable made to order with a fair amount of handwork involved and so on. You've seen the woodwork and so on as well. So there's an element of craftsmanship in it too, so that it gives it a refinement and elegance and so on. So it'll be something unique. Each person can order the turntable in different wood, different finishes, and so on.
Is it always going to be wood?
I've thought about the possibility of using alternative products, because it would probably look quite good if it was in a solid color as well. Imagine Ferrari red or something like that.
Well, yeah, I suppose the reason I ask is that, you take an example, somebody like Clear Audio with a very sculptured metallic option on their flagship turntable. Clearly, this is not one of those, and I think that thing weighs 200 kilograms or something. But be that as it may, I see we have one or two questions coming, and I'm not sure, given the time and whatnot, whether we want to run on as long as, well, let's say 9 o'clock. That may be a bit much. I see that certainly there's one from Sean Onverwacht asking about the servo and calibration. I don't know if it's calibration of the servo or calibration of the turntable. Maybe you want to just go ahead and ask that question, Sean, if you'll join the conversation.
Can you hear me? Okay. No, I was just while you were describing how it works, Lance, I was wondering if it was a servo controlled motor, and then you were saying later that how you set up, and I just typed the word calibration because that's what the technical term for what you did.
Oh, okay.
What you're doing there. Yeah.
Have I kind of answered that, Sean?
Yes, you did. That is, yeah.
Okay. Look, the controller, as Maxon calls it, they don't even reveal how that works. I can tell you that there are 12 different individual wires connecting the motor to the controller. and I have no idea what all of them are for. What I have done is built the chassis and the surrounding components. There's a power supply there, obviously. The motor's happens to be running on 24 volts. I had a choice of voltage, in fact. So that was not an issue either. Essentially, the key to the thing is that regardless of any fluctuations of voltage or frequency on our mains, it has zero effect on the speed of the motor whatsoever. It's completely and utterly screened because it's controlled by data, which is measuring its position in space as it's spinning.
And it's quite an interesting thing when you look at the turntable, you don't actually get an idea that there's technology, digital technology going on there. It looks completely analog. It's my impression.
Yes, I fooled you all, hey? Yeah.
It's this guy from the deep south, they think differently down that way. Look, guys, we've reached our 45-minute limit for the first part of it. Given that the crowd isn't vast, I wondered if it's worth persisting. Maybe I see there's one other question come in, whether we should carry on into part 2 or if we should just carry on for another 10 minutes or quarter of an hour or so max, and then call it an evening. I don't know what the feeling is out there. Any thoughts? Please press your space bar and speak if you have a thought. Nobody has a thought.
Why not carry on?
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. Lance, how are you feeling, Lance? Do you need a break?
I've got some water here, so I can.
That's gin, Lance. That's gin.
If it's gin, I'm breaking the lockdown regulations. Right?
I don't know. I don't mind carrying on. I'm fine. If you guys are all right with it.
Yeah, look, I think if we had a cost of 150 a year, I'd say we need the break and
yes.
and do a Q&A afterwards, because I do a couple of other things I'd like to ask you as well. I don't know
let's take 5 minutes or something.
Yeah, then we can wrap up at the end of it if that's okay with everyone. As I said, this is kind of a learning experience for us, and we'll go softly at the outset. We'll get the real tough questions in at some point.
Oh, okay.
But right now it's about just fostering the interest in this great hobby of ours. Martin, the question of yours, do you want to just, I don't know, I almost feel like it's been answered, but do you want to just ask away and see if Lance can field that one?
Martin doesn't got a microphone.
Oh, well,
I do have a microphone. Can you guys hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Yeah, we can.
No, it's just a mechanical question regards how you keep the platter and the motor stable and reduce any vibration and interference. Because silicon is quite an interesting choice in a drive belt for a turntable. So I'd really like to hear how the vibration from that fantastic motor and its feedback system is translated to the platter.
All right. Thanks, Martin. Yes, I think with all of these things, it's a system. Yes, the motor is deadly accurate in its own, and it's got to transmit that via 2 belts through an intermediate pulley to the platter. I think the key to this thing is the inertia created by the heavy platter, and there's different things that happen. The heavy platter tends to be impervious to the smaller things like vibrations of the belt. I use 2 belts so that the rolling effect, which is often a problem, as a round belt tends to roll, and that creates a slight stretch or differing in force, which can be translated through to the platter. I've used 2 belts on the assumption that they may roll at different times to each other, but I found that I couldn't really measure the difference between 1 belt, 2 belt, or 3 belts. And in the end, I took a thumb suck and I thought, I'll go for the 2, because there is a point where the belt is joined, and that little point could have had a little bit of an effect. So with the twin belt system, we put the joins at different parts. But Martin, the main reason why the turntable is as accurate as it is because of the heavy platter and the inertia on that.
Nice.
Okay, there is a question that is to the point, and it is very simply, how much would she cost?
2 arms and a leg, I'd say, more or less. I've set the price at this point at 350,000. That's approximate. We don't know what the economy is going to be like when we emerge from this lockdown, but that's where I've set it, and it compares quite favorably to turntables twice the price, 3 times the price, in some people's opinions.
To use an automotive analogy, I'm afraid I use them all the time. It's a sort of a GSM Dart Flamingo type thing, or is it maybe a little bit even higher up the scale than that?
Your analogies have got me a bit confused there.
Well, look, very simply, South Africa's had a bit of a history of finding interesting, innovative solutions, and certainly in the automotive field, that we've had a couple of and the names I mentioned were quite successful on the racetrack, albeit they were modifications of
Yes.
existing designs. So, in other words, you're spending beer money, but you're getting a champagne product. Is that what we're saying? And not beer, but expensive craft beer.
Anthony, yes, I have unashamedly aimed at the top of the pile. And I say the top of the pile, price-wise, it's nowhere near the top of the pile.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a turntable the other day which costs an 11 million rand. So there are silly things like that out there, and there are obviously some people in the world that are prepared to part with that kind of cash. I imagine they then feel that they have huge bragging rights. But I hope that some people would like my turntable, and they'll feel that they've got bragging rights out of that too. But not only that, bought something which is really sensible, which is a pleasure to look at, pleasure to use, touch, a whole experience. That was what I was aiming at.
Now, the word you use there is turntable, of course. You have a product. Some people have a product line. And they do that because they believe that they do not have, there's not just one niche out there. And you've got to maybe subsidize that premium product with some lower end products. What do you think about that?
Well, it's been suggested, and I have not been able to apply my mind to that yet. I leave it open, but I'm not keen to get into a production type situation where you have to move numbers, because that requires another whole category of manufacture, marketing, etc., etc. I feel with this type of product, I see Stefan is just joining us there. With this type of product, the idea is to get one-off orders and not be flooded with the orders. And each one is special in itself and worthwhile doing.
Isn't this something the Japanese do so well? They can harmoniously coexist. The giant behemoths of manufacturing and industry on the one hand, and the artists and craftsmen, the almost cottage industry on the other hand.
Yes. Of course, all those things take a huge amount of money to get off the ground. Actually, starting a manufacturing business is pretty much a nightmare in South Africa, given our market. If we were in a bigger market, say the USA, for example, I should imagine it could be somewhat easier. because you've got ready-made people wanting to part with cash, and it's much more, there's a lot more business happening. So I'm reluctant to, at this stage, go into that sort of level or that sort of marketing.
I needn't ask you, of course, if you're a believer in the analog type of thinking, because you've stated that at the outset. So, and that's a whole nother argument. But certainly you are a believer in the fact that there is a market for a premium product to play an admittedly imperfect medium and extract the maximum out of it. I think unless somebody, one of the audience members has a desire to ask another question, we might start wrapping up at this point. Anybody? Okay, well, I think it's been an evening that I would call reasonably successful. I await feedback from those who participated. If any, I'd appreciate it. Maybe just a note in the chat or something. Because, as I said, we're feeling our way here with this. I think we've got possibilities to expand this to other kinds of interesting subjects. And we don't have that many turntable manufacturers, but we've certainly got plenty interesting designers and thinkers and innovators in the audio world, and plenty of people who would happily talk marketing to us. And we'll try to carry this forward, run with it a bit, see how it goes. COVID-19 notwithstanding, we may go on and do this even after lockdown in about 2035, who knows? But for the rest, I enjoyed the evening. It was a stimulating chat. I learned a couple of things that I didn't know. And I hope you did too, and it was worthwhile. And thank you once again to all of you for joining us this evening. Appreciated it, and well, we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Anthony and Lance. So great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Cheers, guys.
Any last minute questions?
You're welcome.
Nobody? Okay. Bye.
Bye.
That it?
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye all.